Before we move on to the NFL, we'll see what the Gophers have in store on the defensive side in 2020. Next on the Voice of College Football. Breaking down the Gophers here at MarkRogersTV, the Voice of College Football. So please like, comment your thoughts on Big Ten football, Minnesota in particular, down below. And, of course, share the videos on social media and subscribe. Turn on the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. Daniel House is here to talk Minnesota football, of course, coming off that breakthrough year at 11-2. Let's focus on the defense. Of course, people like to focus on the offense. And with all the sterling playmakers on the outside and Tanner Morgan emerging as a top-flight quarterback, that gets the attention. But with 4 big losses on the defensive side and Antoine Winfield just recently being selected all-decade by the Big Ten Network, the loss is substantial there. So set us up on the defensive side, Daniel.
Well, losing Antoine Winfield Jr. is the biggest thing. I mean, that guy did everything for the defense. All the checks that he made, the things that they were able to do from a scheme standpoint. Winfield being gone is obviously a huge loss, but safety Tyler Nubin is going to slide into that role. Love his versatility. One of the top recruits in that cycle. He's going to be asked to step up in a big way. You look at this season coming in, 33% of the Gophers' defensive production is returning, which ranks 125th out of 130 programs. So player development, throwing guys into roles is going to be really important. And with coronavirus limiting the amount of contact that they have and the schedule looking different, they've been preparing for this for quite a while, though. They've been developing players behind the scenes. I look at Boye Mafe, a pass rusher that's going to take Carter Coughlin's spot. I would peg him as a breakout player candidate in the Big Ten. You look at the athletic metrics, what he did on a production basis when he's in on a rotational role. Asezion Moeo, another player who was on a rotational basis. I think the defensive line is the biggest area you're going to notice a difference. This might be the deepest, most versatile group and athletic of the PJ Fleck era. So watch the defensive line, the linebacker room. Mariano Sori-Marin will be the leader of that group with Thomas Barber and Kamal Martin departing. You see what happened with the defense. You've got Kamal Martin, you've got Carter Coughlin, Antoine Winfield Jr., just a litany. Chris Williamson, the nickel cornerback, 3-technique defensive tackle, Sam Renner. They lost a lot of very talented players. So you're looking at guys like Mariano Sori-Marin, Tyler Nubin, Boye Mafe, Keontae Shad, all needing to play big roles for this defense to restore form to what it was last year. You look at 4th best defense in program history for S&P Plus efficiency, which was startling to me. The 1977 defense was number 1. 2016 defense came in at number 2, but you look at being 4th all-time in defensive efficiency and 26th overall in the country. The defense, how do they replace those players? It's a big question mark heading into the season, but I like what Joe Rossi has done in terms of developing players behind the scenes.
Daniel, of course, this year of all years is almost impossible to project in terms of new players coming on campus and being an impact player in year number 1 without spring training and a lot of the offseason conditioning and reps, both on the field and in the film room, at least collectively. But that said, with the recruiting classes being upgraded as much as they have under PJ Fleck, any true freshmen that you expect to be significant, receive that significant playing time?
I would keep an eye on Jalen Glaze, a cornerback. Potentially could play the nickel spot. I believe the nickel spot is one of the areas that is going to be up for grabs when things resume. Chris Williamson played such a big role in that scheme as a blitzer, able to match him up on some of the most dynamic weapons each and every week. Is Justice Harris the nickel cornerback? Did they try Jalen Glaze? He could play between nickel corner and safety. That's one name I would keep an eye on. I like I said in the offensive video, I'm not sure what the impact of true freshmen is going to look like this year, especially with limited contact and things like that. Maybe the redshirt freshmen are players to watch, like D'Angelo Carter inside, Rashad Cheney. Like I said, the defensive line had a lot of recruiting resources invested into it. I look on the outside, Devion Harris, MJ Anderson. They probably slide up into those rotational roles on the defensive line. So I'd watch the redshirt freshmen specifically because they've had a year in the strength and conditioning program and the system, and they'll be asked to probably help on a rotational snap basis this season at least.
Jacob Herbers moves on after 2 years as the starting punter. 11 of 15 in the field goal department between two kickers. Your thoughts on how it looks on the special teams unit for 2020?
From a special standpoint, it's interesting. The Gophers went to Australia to get a new punter, Mark Crawford. You see this Pro Kick Australia movement. I've been digging into this. You look at some of the punters in the NFL that are having success. Australia Dixon with the Seattle Seahawks. Other punters that have had a lot of success coming out of that Australian punter development system in those Aussie style roles. And it's like an academy for punters over there. So I was very interested last year to look at some of the numbers that Herbers did last year as a punter. And you look at the way that they use bounce to their advantage. So like there was about 2.5 bounce yards per punt last year on average, which is really good. You look at the averages on punts, it's normally between 1 to 1.5 yards. So almost double what the average is. The Gophers had on punts. They did a nice job of containing returns on punts. I think the coverage units are areas that need to get a little bit better. Maybe the return game, trying to improve field position next year. Kicking wise, Michael Lance kicked for a while last year, and Brock Walker finished it out. Lance had a huge kick against Fresno State to win the game. The kicking was strong last year, I thought, for the most part. Punting, the specialists will be fine. I think tuning up the coverage units. They're pretty young last year across the special teams units. So I think that's where you're going to notice the biggest difference. In 2018, the Gophers had one of the most efficient special teams units in the country, and they kind of had to rework everything. But it's positive to see what they were able to do with the punting game and being near the top in terms of bounce yards, air yards, things like that. I track all these punts, and I'll be putting out a post next week just discussing some of the key special teams metrics that fans should know about.
All right, Daniel, breakout season for PJ Fleck and company last year, that the catalyst being the defensive changes that were made at the end of 2018 and the big stretch drive in November in the big bowl win against Georgia Tech. When we look at Minnesota football over the past 3 decades to 35 years, we see a lot of 7-5 seasons. That's what it's been for the most part, 500 Big Ten. But with what he did at his previous stop and now the 11-2 breakthrough, Wisconsin and Iowa are still in the way. What would be the expectation in regards to a line of demarcation? What's the expectation? What would be a truly successful season, and what may fall short of expectations for you?
I think you're looking to be right around where you were last year with competing against Wisconsin and Iowa, trying to break through there. I've said it for a while. The next step for this team, when I look at the whole roster and everything, the offense is going to be efficient. They'll be able to build upon what they did last year. I feel confident in that. It's about replacing that production on defense. And I think that starts by creating more pressure with 4 rushers. I just put out a post talking about the value of blitzing. The Gophers use blitz extremely well, especially on third down. You look at blitzing on almost a quarter of their total snaps last year when I charted all of the plays, and they were extremely productive within those snaps. And the post talks about that in a little more detail. Their 11.8% havoc rate last year was like 94th nationally among their front 7. So you need to be able to get more pressure with 4 rushers. Without the blitzing, what the numbers really tell me is that number probably would have been a lot lower than it was. So finding ways to create pressure with 4 rushers and handle the physicality of playing against teams like Iowa and Wisconsin, getting pressure on the quarterback consistently. And like we talked about, the investment that they've made into the defensive line in recent classes is going to show up very soon. I don't know how quickly it will, if it's immediately this year. How long does it take the defense to get going? But the 4-man rushes, that's the big key for me. If they can do that, they have a lot to build around. You see St. Juice and Coney Durr playing cornerback on the outside, and then they got to just fill that nickel spot. So defensive line, the nickel spot, and then having a young linebacker core and Tyler Newman in the back end replacing Winfield. There's question marks on defense, but a lot of upside. And with Joe Rossi's creativity, we'll see what happens.
To me, it's the intriguing program in the Big Ten because we know what the upper echelon is. We know who the underlings are who will never get there. And Minnesota seems to be, who knows? Was that an aberration? Was it not? PJ Fleck obviously has things on the right course. Daniel House joining us. And again, we want you to check out his site at Gophers Guru. Daniel joins us on a regular basis to break down the Gophers and does an outstanding job. Daniel, we appreciate you stopping by. We're keeping our fingers crossed for football in about 8 or 9 weeks.
I am too. Thanks for having me, Mark.